Okay, good evening. My name is Luke Connolly. I'm a senior planner with the City of Cupertino, and I'm managing the city's housing element update. I want to thank you for coming out tonight. We've got a few people in the house here at Community Hall and quite a few more on Zoom. So this is a hybrid meeting. It's going to be a very interactive meeting. So if you're used to a typical community meeting format where it's more like just a presentation, this is going to be a lot more interactive. The housing element, as you may or may not know, is a very lengthy undertaking. It's an update of an element of the city's general plan. It's done every 8 years. There's a lot of facets to the housing element, but the focus of tonight's meeting is going to really be on outreach and AFFH, which is affirmatively furthering fair housing. We'll be getting into what that really means tonight as the presentation develops. So I'm not going to belabor that. We've got a pretty tight schedule. The meeting is expected to go an hour and a half and stay on point. There will be opportunities to go into breakout rooms where you'll have a chance to ask questions, talk, and listen to others and gain a different perspective on housing issues. So with that, I'm going to be turning this over to, we have Josh Salo with West Valley Community Services, and Andy Flower with EMC Planning, who is the city's lead consultant on the housing element. And with that, I will turn it over to Josh.
Thank you so much, Luke. I appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. Those of you here in person and those of you online. It's very exciting to be here with you talking about one of my favorite topics. Yes, housing. We spend a lot of time at West Valley Community Services talking about housing, helping our clients find housing, and addressing the need for more housing. And recently I picked up this book, Golden Gates, and it's by Connor Doherty. And it's about the housing crisis in the Bay Area. And here's a quote from the book: "Housing is the foremost symbol of inequality and an economy gone wrong," which I thought is a really interesting and eye-opening quote about the challenges we're facing related to housing. As Luke mentioned, we have a tight agenda, so we're going to jump into what our purpose is this evening and our goals that brought you here tonight. If we can go to the next slide. Our goals for this evening are to gain a better understanding of AFFH, affirmatively furthering fair housing, and inclusion in Cupertino's housing element. And we have an excellent panel on tap for tonight to help us explore that very topic. We're going to engage in dialogue with those of you here in person and those of you online, so there'll be opportunities to do that as well. And we're going to help you find ways to get involved with the housing element in Cupertino, because this is a community process which requires community engagement and involvement, and we want you to feel empowered and know the pathways by which you can engage in the housing element process. On your screen and in front of you in a moment, you'll see the agenda for this evening. It'll give you a broad overview of the topics we'll be covering over the course of our time together. We will have a presentation on the housing element and AFFH. We'll have a couple of breakout rooms, and we'll also have the panel that I mentioned earlier. Now, because of the pandemic, we haven't been gathering together so much in person as a community, and I want to make sure we are all on the same page into the ways we want you all to show up together so we can have the most constructive conversation. And so on your screen, you're going to see a list of community agreements that we're hoping all of you can participate in tonight and agree with. And again, this is so we all can show up, we all can feel welcome, we all can feel seen and all engaged, but also be able to be heard. So you'll see on your screen the following agreements. Use I statements. You're speaking from your own personal perspective. We want people to step up and share their opinions, but also step back to make room for other people to join in the conversation. We want to learn a lot. So what's learned here, the concepts that are learned here, we want you to leave here and talk about them with your neighbors and friends. But we don't want to attribute them to specific people. So what's said here by specific people stays in this room. You know, one of the things we're not always strong about is assuming best intentions. So we do want to assume best intentions of all of our speakers. We want to listen and give people space to finish their thoughts before we add on to them. And it is okay to disagree. That famous statement, we can agree to disagree, is a good one to keep in mind. We want to be respectful and engage in conflict resolution in a constructive manner, and know that there's a broad variety of differences of opinion, and that's okay. That's what makes a community. And we have to respect that people are coming to the issue of housing from different places, and we're all here to learn. And you're not here to convince someone else of your opinion. We're just here to learn and share our own opinions. And of course, we want to uplift each other and also check in to make sure we're all okay. So while I cannot see all of your faces on the screen, if you can all, maybe those in the room and those on screen, put a thumbs up that we're good to engage based on the community agreements. I see a lot of thumbs in the room. I'm going to assume that I see thumbs on screen, but as I said, I can't see all of you, so I'm sorry. A little bit of a housekeeping as we get started tonight. So as Luke said, this is a hybrid meeting. We're just getting used to the hybrid structure. So it's a little bit weird for all of us. It will be taped. So if you missed something tonight and you want to come back and watch it later, you'll be able to watch the video. For folks online, you can rename yourself by clicking the 3 dots in the upper right corner of your box. You can also turn your camera on or turn it off, whatever you feel comfortable. You all will be in breakout rooms, in person or online, and you should engage to whatever extent you feel you can or are interested in the breakout rooms. No one is required to participate, but we're hoping that you will. And whether you're in person or online, there's no need to raise your hand. We'll be soliciting questions at different times. You'll have opportunity to add them in the panelists, and we'll let you know when those things are. We'll also be doing some polls, which will work a little bit differently. We'll report the poll data for the folks online. For you all here in person, we'll still take your poll information, but we'll send out an email after tonight's event, and we'll add your responses into the poll so we can see full numbers for all participants. One of the challenges of Zoom when half of us are here and half of us are online. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and start with our opening poll, which is coming up on your screen. We're going to hand out to folks in the room the poll questions. It's being printed, so we'll hand it out a little bit delayed to you, but you can hear the questions that we're asking. The first is on a scale of 1 to 10. How strong of a sense do you think you have of other people's experiences related to housing? So go ahead and fill in. We will give you all a chance to fill in as well, but we're asking people to go in and give their answer and click submit. 1 means you have little sense or understanding. 10 means you are significantly, you are a real leader in this. I would love to meet that person. So go ahead and submit your answers as you have them. Let's give it another second or two. I would love to repeat the question, but I deleted it from in front of me, so I don't have it here, but they're going to share the results right now, and I will give it to you. Sure. Can we see those results? Thank you. On a scale of 1 to 10, how strong of a sense do you think you have of other people's experience related to housing? Okay, so it looks like we have an interesting spread here. We have a little bit on the lower end, 2s and 3s, and then a little bit toward the top on 8. So it's a pretty interesting spread. Again, the person or people who indicated 10, I'd love to get a chance to chat with you. Okay, and do we have another poll question or just one poll question to start with? 3. Let's get the second poll question. The second poll question, have you ever experienced housing-related challenges such as housing insecurity, trouble paying rent, eviction, or homelessness? Have you ever experienced housing-related challenges such as housing insecurity, trouble paying rent, eviction, or homelessness? And there is a prefer not to say, folks, if you want to include that one or one of the other answers. Let's just give this one a short time and we'll submit those answers. And for folks in the room, your questionnaires are coming around now, so you'll be able to fill out your answers. Okay, can we see those poll results? Okay, so it looks like we have a pretty bit of a split. 35% say yes, they've experienced one of the below, housing insecurity, trouble paying rent, eviction, or homelessness. And just over half said no. And props to the folks who said prefer not to say. That is a great answer as well. Okay, we're gonna close that one. Hit the close button on your screen. And we have one more question for you all. Third question, how much do you know about affirmatively furthering fair housing? How much do you know about affirmatively furthering fair housing? And that's, I've never heard of it, very little, some, a lot, or I am an expert. And I'm willing to cede my seat. Okay, go ahead and submit those answers. Okay, going once, going twice, going 3 times. Let's see those results. Okay, So this is evenly split among all four. 26% of attendees said they've never heard of it. 30% indicated very little. 22% indicated some, and 22% indicated a lot. So this is a very interesting division across the group that's attending tonight, and it's good that you're here because you are going to learn about it right now. And with that, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Andy and Lee, who are going to talk to us about the housing element and affirmatively furthering fair housing.
Thank you, Josh. I'm Andy Flower from EMC Planning Group. And tonight we're just going to have a quick overview of the housing element. We're not going to dive deep. We do want to let you know that you can get more information from the engagecupertino.org website that we have available, and it's constantly evolving. There's always new ways to participate, and we hope that you all will. So the housing element update, it's required by state law to make sure that the housing capacity exists, and that's an important word, capacity. So we're just making sure that there are places where housing could be built over this next 8-year cycle. So the housing element is an 8-year cycle. It's part of the general plan, and it's a visionary document. So we're trying to make sure that if there were to be any housing dreamed of and then constructed within this 8 years, that everything is in place to make that happen, that there are locations, that there is appropriate zoning, and that there is the will of the people. And if you could forward the slide. Yes, and so we're also working with our regional housing needs allocation, and that's the target number for the homes specific to the city of Cupertino for this 8-year cycle. Next slide, please. So who is responsible for building housing? It takes so many different people. So we've got city staff, developers, current neighbors, future neighbors, policymakers. We all need to come together to make sure that there are the appropriate policies, predictable regulations, and we can do what we can about the reasonable building costs. But we do look to all of those to see if there are barriers to this housing construction, and then we create the policies to try to mitigate for those barriers. So that's what we're working on right now, and we'll be working on this throughout the year, and we're asking for as much participation as we can have. And next slide, please. To be a little more specific about what the numbers are for Cupertino, this is our list of numbers allocated to the city of Cupertino. It's important to understand that very low income, and moderate income are all considered affordable housing. So combined, 2,635 homes are understood as needed both now and into this 8-year future cycle. And that's what we're trying to accommodate for. Our total is 4,588. We've begun looking at sites, and we're next going to be talking about policies. And in order to talk about policies, we need to understand a lot more about the community need. And Lee, if you'll help with this slide, we'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our conversation. It's great to have you here. And I can't see those who are in person, but welcome. So you've probably, if you've heard me talk about this, and you've heard this word throughout this process, I'm sure, this idea of equity, right? This idea of equity, and our focus on equity is the beginning point to have a deeper conversation about inclusion. Okay, so you all see this diagram we're showing here. All right, you see this diagram, and I'm going to walk through it really quickly. Now, for some of you all may have seen this before or heard this before, so it might be a refresher for you. And for those who have not, this might be some new information and a great place to start exploring our ideas about inclusion. So in the top half of our image here, we see this circle, right? And it has all these different colors and blue, red, green, yellow, and they're all existing in this one space, in this one circle, and that's inclusion. And we can imagine within that circle that there are certain resources, a quality of life, maybe even access, right? So when we get to the bottom half of our image here, we have 3 other circles. The left side of the furthest circle left is exclusion. Now, exclusion, you see the circle still there, and only the green group is inside the circle. And the rest of the colors are outside of that circle. All right. So again, if we're thinking about resources, maybe on the outside of that circle, there may be lack of resources, maybe a different quality of life, and maybe even lack of access, right? So that's exclusion. Only the green groups in the middle, everyone else is excluded. Next up, we see segregation, okay? And this one is, okay, you can have your group, but it has to be outside of this group. So again, we have our circle, The green folks are in the circle, and on the outside of the circle, the other colors are there still, but then they're lumped into another circle. All right. So we may ask, okay, so what are the resources that are accessible within that smaller circle? Quality of life, access, etc. And then finally, the final circle we see there is integration, right? Integration, that green circle, the folks are still green in the circle. However, the other colors have moved into the circle, but they're still within their own little bubble, right? So again, we're asking what resources look like within that smaller bubble, access, et cetera. It's not like the inclusion circle where things are just freely flowing and not in some sort of contained state, all right? So when we think about inclusion, all right, when is it important in the process? It's important throughout the policymaking process. It's important when we're considering the need for housing and what those housing needs look like, and also anticipation of the plan results. So what we're going to do now, tonight, this is the biggest thing we're going to do tonight, is think about the next slide, if someone would forward the next slide, is think about how we talk about diversity, how do we talk about integration, how we talk about inclusion, right? So AB 686, some of you may have heard about that, Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, AFFH. This is taking meaningful actions in addition to combating discrimination to overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities free from barriers and restrict access to opportunity based on protected characteristics. So that's what we're going to do tonight, okay? We are going to have some conversations about some of these things. This is a meaningful action that we're going to do, is community dialogue, okay? We're going to have small group conversations where we're going to talk about our experiences. We're going to share and reflect on the experience we're having tonight together. We're also going to have an opportunity to hear a panel, which is going to break down even more experiences. And we may even hear something that we've never heard before. We may be experiencing something we've never experienced. And that's the main reason why we're here, is to hear some different needs from each other and from our neighbors. And again, we may hear something that's hard to hear. It may feel new, it may feel awkward, it may feel a lot of different kinds of things because it's something new. It's a new kind of participation that we're engaging in tonight, okay? And your answers matter. This conversation matters. Your experiences matter. So we are going to create an environment where we can talk, we can listen, and we can learn, and we can grow, okay? So I'm going to hand it over to Josh, and we're going to jump into our first breakout room.
Thank you so much, Lee. We are excited to begin to engage in smaller group conversation. If you're here in the room, you should have received a slip that indicates which breakout room you'll be going to. Over in the back corner, where Councilmember Moore is, that will be breakout room number 1. Over in the opposite corner will be breakout room number 2, and we just did 2, correct? So 1 and 2. If you're online, you will be moving into online breakout rooms with a moderator who will assist you in your conversation. We are going to be discussing a few different questions, including your name and what brings you here tonight. What do you think inclusive housing looks like in Cupertino? And what are some people that need to be included? Who should this housing be built for? And what questions do you want to ask the panelists? Now, each group is going to have a moderator, and the moderator will be taking some notes. These are anonymous notes. They will not be ascribed to any specific person, and that helps us give a report out after the night's event, and also to take notes of the questions that you want asked. Again, if you don't feel comfortable participating in the breakouts and you want to just take a pass and just listen in, that's okay too. Just say, I prefer not to speak. I just want to listen into the conversation. You'll have 10 minutes in your breakouts. So once we move everyone online, folks in the room, you can also head to your breakouts. And I think with that, we're ready. We will see you in 10 minutes. Okay, we're gonna get started again, y'all, because everyone is back in the main room. So please come join us for our panel. I hope you had productive conversations. I mean, you're welcome to stay back there and watch from your tables, or you can come back into the stadium seating area and join us over here. And to our folks on Zoom, you will be returning back to breakouts at the end of tonight's program with those same folks. So look forward to a follow-up conversation a little bit later tonight. It's now time to introduce our panel for the evening. And we're honored to have 4 panelists with us who will share their expertise on homelessness, affordable housing, neurodivergence, disabilities, veteran status, and more. And what makes this panel particularly useful and unique and powerful is that our panelists speak from a place of lived experience. This can be a really vulnerable place to speak from, essentially telling your own story. So we're incredibly grateful for their participation tonight. Our panelists are Mayor Dundon, welcome Mayor, Joshua Pringle, hello Joshua, Kim Hing, hey Kim, and Yvonne Rose. Good evening, Yvonne. So hopefully we'll get to see their pictures up on the screen. I'll wait while we get that together. I see a whole bunch of faces. Hey folks, good to see you. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead. I think we're spotlighting the panel, so we're gonna get that started, and we're gonna jump right into our first question. And this question is for all of our panelists. And the question is, please tell us a little bit about yourself, one or two things you would like the participants tonight to know about you. And when we asked you to do this, why did you agree to join the panel this evening? And Yvonne, why don't we start with you?
I knew you were going to do that. So my name is Yvonne Nazareth Rose. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. Let me see. I'm previously homeless. I am a recipient of one of the homeless vouchers called the HUD voucher. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. I'm part of the LGBTQ community. I'm a trans guy. Why did I decide to do this today? Because I want to bring some awareness to the rest of the community about people like me, and that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. We're looking forward to hearing more from you in a little bit. Mayor, why don't you pick up next?
Okay, so my name is Mayor Dundon, and I'm going to start with why I showed up today. It took me a really long time to find affordable housing, not only because I'm disabled, but because of some challenges with neurodivergence and also a lot of challenges in getting places and doing things consistently with my capacity. And I've also had a lot of experience working with people doing something called daily living coaching. And so I work with seniors and people who live in their cars, so people who participate in safe park programs, and also in disability justice. So I do a lot of community care, and I hear a lot of people's stories, as well as being able to use my experience as a product and service designer to kind of help us have good ideas for lowering the barriers to people getting in here and participating.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mayor. Joshua, how about you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Josh. The reason why I joined this panel is, well, it's actually my first time doing this type of panel. So want to do that for sure. And secondly, I've also been a client of West Valley Community Services for about, 8 years and counting now. So since 2014. And I just want to, share the experiences I went through, me being homeless and then just trying to find affordable housing, me having low income on top of that, having bad credit on top of that as well. So just to, talk about a little bit about my experiences through that and just, share that. And then what I'm able to do now, since I've been in affordable housing, how I was able to save up money, get into like credit coaching, stuff like that. So happy to be here.
Awesome, thank you. Kim will be joining us in a couple of minutes, and so we'll have Kim introduce themselves when they get here. I should have mentioned that there will be an opportunity for you all to ask questions, both folks online and folks in person. We'll let you know about the process for that shortly. We're gonna start with some questions that we prepared in advance for the panel. And since Joshua, you're up still on my screen, we're gonna have you start if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
So what are some things you'd like people to know in terms of stereotypes folks might have about poverty, affordable housing, or homelessness?
Oh man, that is a great question, actually. I mean, it's I'll just put it like this. People tend to look at you a little bit different, knowing that you're not in the same like income bracket as them. You do get treated a little bit different. People tend to, I guess you could say like just like look out for you because they just assume that you won't be able to like afford this or that type of thing. You know what I mean? But I mean, since I've been doing this affordable housing for the past 8 years, I've been learning to just to manage my money, put money aside for like rainy days, and then of course, I mean, now having a decent paying job now, I can actually able to afford a little bit more nice things in life, here and there. But yeah, I mean, that's like the main stereotype that I've been seeing is like people try to like I wouldn't go as far as like diminish, but just think you like a little bit less when you're not in the same income bracket as like everybody else, or so on and so forth.
Thanks, Joshua. I remember hearing a story from a client who told us that she didn't want to go to the hospital. She'd been living in her car and she didn't want to go to the hospital because and tell them that she was living in her car because she said, I know the way people look at you when you tell them that you're unhoused. And she didn't want to reveal that about herself. It's hard to reveal that, but
yeah,
it changes the way.
One more thing to that too, since you said that. Yeah, I had a full-time job in San Carlos. And I would commute back and forth because I was literally homeless when I had this job. And I just didn't want anybody to find out that I was going through that because I felt embarrassed. Even though I probably shouldn't be, I just felt embarrassed that, I had no place to go and everybody's talking about, I'm just gonna go home and sleep, and I just couldn't do that. So yeah, I felt what that person's coming from for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Joshua. How about you, Mayor? What are some stereotypes that you've heard folks have about poverty, affordable housing, homelessness, and you also bring the neurodivergence lens to the conversation, so feel free to add that as well.
So I think that what's pretty fascinating in the experience, my personal experience and the experiences that I hear, is there's a lot of conversation about people making bad choices, and that's why that they are in the place that they are. And I do often challenge that because a lot of stuff happens to us that we have no control over. So I do want to have people stop and think about that before they make those kinds of assumptions. Other assumptions that I am seeing a lot are that people are actually not good with money, that they just don't have any money, and that they're not working hard enough. That's another one that I hear a lot. I've even had that said to me, that I just wasn't doing enough. And I'm like, wow. Because the reality is that there isn't any housing. There wasn't any housing when I was going after it. And so the assumption that people are just not working hard enough, or if they just did it in a different way, then they could get help. Mm-hmm. Those are really painful assumptions that people have. And then coming from the neurodivergence perspective, I actually come from a trauma-informed perspective. So everybody has their challenges, their ways of moving through the world that are different from other folks. And thus, if someone causes a problem, then that's why they're homeless. That's why they don't have money, because they can't conform to the standards that other people have of behavior. That's what we're here to talk about tonight, is how can we widen that lens enough to allow people to actually be alive in the way that they do.
Thank you, Mayor. Yvonne, do you want to add to this as well? What are some stereotypes you think folks have related to poverty, affordable housing, and homelessness? I know you've been having some connection challenges. Are you with us, Yvonne? Okay, we're going to keep going then.
Oh,
there you are. We hear you, Yvonne. Yes.
I'm sorry.
It's all good.
I forgot to hit unmute. One of the biggest things is that people think it can't happen to them. And they think that, I think Josh said this earlier, when you're in a homeless situation or at homelessness, people look at you differently, and it's like they know. even if they don't really know, if people even suspect that you're anywhere near being homeless, they treat you as less than a citizen. Like somebody with leprosy or something. So I think that, and they kind of judge us by judge our worth based upon where we live or don't live. So, but they forget that this can happen to them at any moment. And I think that's something that anyone who's ever been homeless, that's something that we had to find out, that, this is nothing, I raised my hand for and said, okay, yeah, I volunteer to be homeless. This is something that happened due to, in my case, things that were basically out of my control. So that's the one thing I kind of want to get community members to see, is that don't judge, because you could end up there yourself.
Thank you, Yvonne. I think that is so wise. If one of the lessons I learned during COVID with all the folks that came in for help is that we were seeing people we didn't typically see, but also people who never thought they would have to ask for help from an organization like ours. And you're right, it really can happen to anyone. So thank you, Yvonne. I appreciate that. Since we have you, Yvonne, on the screen right now, can you talk a little bit about your experience as a veteran and how it relates to housing, what it was like to get a voucher?
Yes. I'm one of those people who never thought that I would have to ask for help. And pride, I have a lot of pride like anybody else. But luckily for me, I'm a vet, and I found out that there's like millions of dollars that the VA hands, it awards to organizations like West Valley to take care of vets. And one of those programs is the HUD voucher. So for people who are looking to rent and they're within an income threshold, the VA, in partnership with the local housing authorities, they give a voucher akin to Section 8, where they pay, like, I want to say 90% or 95% of the rent. It's a process. You have to take classes. You have case management from the VA side. So there's a lot of help that goes into this program. If you're looking for a job, and let's say, I don't know, you have a vehicle that doesn't run well, this program can also help you with, fixing your vehicle. It can provide like different types of transportation costs.
Oh, it looks like we lost you, Yvonne. Well, hopefully you'll be able to join us back again, so we can hear the rest of that thought. As we're transitioning to a new question, folks online, if you have questions, we'll be taking audience questions in a little bit. You should send them using the chat box on your screen to either Geeta Sundar or Vivian Dang, and they will make sure they get to me so I can ask our panel. Folks in the room, if you need a piece of paper to write a question on, raise your hand and a member of our team will bring around a piece of paper. Once you have that paper ready, you can lift it up in the air and they will bring us those questions. Why don't we go to you, Mayor? You identified yourself as neurodivergent, which for some folks is not a word that they recognize. So can you talk with us a little bit, what does it mean to be neurodivergent? How does it relate to the maybe more common word we know as disabilities? And how does that figure into your experience in terms of housing?
Beautiful. So this may be a word that people don't recognize or see as something that's not a good word, but neurodivergence is actually a word that is a very broad umbrella term for people that have differences in sensory or cognitive or the way that they think and the way that they are in the world. So neurodivergence is a very broad spectrum. You hear people talk about autism and ADHD specifically, but there's an enormous amount of other neurodivergence that is under that umbrella. Things like PTSD, things like OCD, dyslexia, It's a very, very broad term. And what I like about that is that it allows us to have conversations across a wider variety of differences. It also lets us get into the conversation, which fits perfectly with our conversation tonight, about needs. So we no longer use terms like high functioning and low functioning. We don't do that because that's quite ableist. That's a term that indicates if you're low functioning, you're less valued. We don't want to do that. We don't want to put that on to people. So we tend to use support needs, higher support needs, lower support needs, specific support needs. This is where we begin to intersect with disability. I'm talking about disability from the model, it's called the social model. I'm not talking about a medical model of disability, which means that in the social model, disability is considered those interactions with our societies and the places where we can't participate because of how they're designed and created, and because of the attitudes of the people in that society about what we should and should not be able to do. So neurodivergence and disability, I have an intersection of those two things. Sometimes neurodivergence goes into a support needs place where disability is what it is considered. In terms of housing, I want to be really clear here because there's been a lot of disagreement about these things, that neurodivergence shouldn't be talked about. What I am saying is that we're talking about the whole process of housing. So maybe someone who is neurodivergent doesn't necessarily need the physical accommodations, but maybe they need some help within the process of filling out the forms, of going through the process of getting into the place, having the decisions, interacting with the people around things that are going on within that process. So that's why we're bringing neurodivergence into the conversation.
Thank you. So it's more than just the unit itself, it's the whole process around housing and being part of a community, successfully being part of a community. Awesome. Thank you, Mayor. Joshua, you talked about the transition for you from being unhoused in San Carlos and working to finding housing. Can you talk to us about that process, how that transition worked, and maybe what are some benchmarks in that movement from being unhoused to being housed?
Oh man, it was a long process. I'll tell you that. I was working in San Carlos. I was still homeless at the time. I was at a rotating shelter program in Sunnyvale. So I would just transition from like one church and another church to another, and I would just be sleeping there for the time being, and I would just go to work. It wasn't until one day where a caseworker, I believe it was from West Valley actually, came to one of the shelters to try to get me and then some other people in a transitional housing program. So it was separated between men had their own unit and then women had their own separate unit. So I think the max amount of people for men was like 6 men per house, I want to say. So 2 people per room, pretty much. It was a 3-bedroom house, 2 people per room. And then we would have just like caseworkers just come and check on us. And then they would like, we would have them, we would have give them updates on our income and things like that. So that way they can just keep it in their database, and then maybe they can put that information towards like any upcoming like units that may be available for like our income range. So with that being said, there was a caseworker that came by earlier that talked to me and my current roommate, Richard. Richard was actually working in Cupertino at the time. And then me, I just tagged along. So they decided to combine both of our incomes and then put that towards like a deposit for the apartment. So we waited for about, not too long, I want to say about a month. And then after that, we took a look at the apartment to see, how it looked and everything, if we liked it or not. And then, eventually we moved in. This was back in April of 2014. But it was really tough because before all that even happened, it was just the fact that I just needed somebody to give me a chance. And it was so hard because I had no laptop. I basically lost everything that I owned. So it was kind of hard for me to just to try to find where somebody can actually just help me out. I would just hop on bus after bus to a library just to get computer access, search for any program that was out there. It was really tough, but yeah, the process took a pretty long time. But once it was finished, it was really smooth. Like I said, we looked at the apartment, put down our deposit, and within like a week, I say we moved in, and yeah, we've been there ever since. But it was a struggle. It was really a struggle, and then just to adapt, being inside of a home again is kind of a struggle too, because you've been without a home for so long. Like it just feels weird. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was the whole process. So
Josh, when you said I needed someone to give me a chance, that really struck me very hard. And one of the things that often happens between people who are unhoused and people who are housed is the safety net. Do you have a safety net? Do you have people who can give you a chance? Mm-hmm. And thank you for lifting that up. Much appreciated.
Of course.
I know that Kim has joined us. Welcome, Kim. We're glad to have you here tonight.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Sorry, technical problems.
Well, it's good to have you here. I thought you could start with the question we had all our panelists start with. Tell us a little bit about yourself, one or two things you'd like the folks in here in the room and on Zoom to know about you, and why did you say yes when we asked you to join this panel?
Okay. I was born in San Jose Hospital. I grew up in Saratoga back when there were still lots of orchards everywhere. I attended Miller Junior High and also Lynbrook High. Go Vikings. I graduated from Smith College with a degree in math. I am an autism self-advocate, and I wasn't diagnosed with autism until I was in my 40s. I'm active as a Special Olympics athlete and an athlete leader. As a global messenger for Special Olympics, I often MC events for them and give speeches to schools to promote inclusion, as well as to corporations to fundraise and encourage people to volunteer. I was excited to participate in this year's Special Olympics Capitol Hill Day, where I met with members of Congress to tell them about the Healthy Athletes Program and the Unified Champion School Program. And recently, I joined the Special Olympics Northern California Board of Directors. I've been on panels to educate Stanford medical students on best practices in treating intellectually and/or developmentally disabled patients. I currently teach kindergartners, second graders, and third graders in an after-school program here in Cupertino. And additionally, I intern at differentbrains.org. I enjoy painting, photography, watching movies, and playing with my two kittens, Brooke and Cinnamon. Let's see.
And Kim, when we asked you to join the panel, why did you say yes?
Because I think it's really important for people to understand that not everybody is really wealthy, but we still live in this city and we need places to live. And it's important for people to understand that there's all different kinds of people that you may not think are actually living in the city, but we are here.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kim. In a moment, we'll transition to some of the questions from our audience, both in person and on Zoom. You still can go ahead and submit questions if you're online. You're going to want to private chat them to Geeta or to Vivian Dang. Here in person, you can just hand them to our team, and they'll add them to the list on the screen. I want to talk for a minute about discrimination in housing, because we haven't talked about that, but Lee really addressed it at the top when we looked at the images of inclusive housing versus exclusive housing. And I'm wondering if any of you can share any experiences of discrimination in housing that you've had here in the community. And does someone want to go first with that question?
I want to talk about something, but it might be kind of like, I don't know if it's relevant to this question, but it's kind of about like stereotypes about affordable housing. Does that fit in with what you're asking?
Yes, please, Kim, go ahead.
Okay, so I think that people have this misconception that low-income people should live someplace else. And I think there's an attitude that the area will become a ghetto if there's low-income housing. And I don't understand why people think that those of us who work the low-paying jobs would trash areas that we live in. I think people want us to work these lower paying jobs because the work needs to be done, but they want us to live someplace else. And I also think people have an attitude that since they pay fair market rate, everyone should do that, and that includes low income people, because they think this is only fair. And back when they were having these meetings, the city was having these meetings about like what Sand Hill should change in its Valco plan. I remember somebody wrote that they should put in micro housing for low income people. And this leads me to believe that there's an attitude that low income people do not deserve pleasant housing. Like we should have these substandard housing just because we don't earn much money. I really think that people believe we're in low income because we don't work hard and that we don't want to better ourselves. And based on these things that I have read on Nextdoor, there's also definitely a stereotype that homeless people are drug addicts or mentally ill and are therefore dangerous. I'd like people to, understand that, I can be low income, but there are reasons why I'm low income, and talk to me and find out, what things are going on for why I am in this category, because I am extremely low income, but there's a lot of reasons for it. And I probably don't fit, this stereotype that you may have for someone in this category.
Thank you, Kim. That was an incredibly powerful response. Does anyone else on our panel want to speak to discrimination in housing? Mayor, you want to take yourself off mute?
Sure. Yeah, sorry. My experience was pretty direct. I walk with a rollator a good chunk of the time, especially when I'm going places that's a four-wheel walker. When I am going places that I don't know. I've literally had people back out of showing me an apartment because of that several times. And so that was pretty interesting. And then other times they were like, well, I'll show it to you if you can get there kind of conversation. So I'm like, okay. And then, so that was a pretty overt block of being able to even look at the housing.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to invite Joshua. You want to go next?
Yeah, I just want to make one more point about that question you just asked. A big thing for me when I was trying to find housing is, it made it so difficult for me to find housing is one, like Kim just mentioned, low income, and two, credit score. I don't know what it is about the credit score, but it's just like if your credit score is really low, most people won't even talk to you after that. Like you can fill an application, but once they do your credit report, it's pretty much a wrap after that. So I kind of think that's a little bit unfair because for me, just because you have a low credit score doesn't mean you can't afford the apartment you're trying to apply for. I've always had an issue with that, and I think that's something that's got to be looked at in the future for sure.
Thank you, Joshua. Yvonne, you want to add something?
Yeah, I kind of want to piggyback off of what Joshua said. Because I worked for the county of Santa Clara when I was coming with my family, and I was coming out of being homeless. And that credit score prevented us from getting into a lot of nice places, and they didn't care how much I was making. And I was making some decent amount of money. But then, so I think as far, people, when they think about discrimination, they think about race or gender or, I don't know, something like that. But there's also financial discrimination that we have to overcome a lot of times. And then also the discrimination of, where did you live in the last 6 months? I can't put, we lived in my truck, so trying to have to come up with something other than telling a lie, is really hard. It shouldn't, it's like it puts you in this between a rock and a hard place, because people, they will discriminate against you based upon where you didn't used to live.
Thank you, Yvonne, for sharing that. You know, one of the things that strikes me, and this is going to one of the questions from our participants, is the challenge of maintaining hope in the face of really insurmountable odds. So I'm going to ask, let's start with you, Josh. How did you maintain hope in that period of being unhoused and trying to work towards finding affordable housing?
I mean, prayer, to be honest. I just always had this firm belief that my life was not going to be like this. And it just took a lot of hard work and dedication, and then just persistence. I truly believe, like, if you're persistent, good things will happen to you, you know? I just kept a good head above my shoulders. And, you know, it also did help me too, that I was also homeless with my mom, and she always tried to keep us, even herself and myself, in good spirits. But yeah, I mean, just staying persistent. You'll get turned down here and there. I've been turned down a lot. So, but you just got to keep going. You just got to have it in the back of your mind, like, something good is going to happen. And that's why I just kept trying to tell myself, even though I was going through all of these trials and tribulations, I just knew something good was going to happen. So, yeah.
Thanks, Josh. Here's another question from Zoom. What's been the greatest housing challenge you've faced? Yvonne, do you want to get us started?
Okay. Basically finding someone to accept my HUD vet voucher. Because when you say voucher, people immediately think Section 8. And even though it's along the same lines, it's a bit different. The only people who can get this voucher are veterans. And so if you're turning me down because you think I'm going to, I don't know, knock holes into your wall, you forget that I volunteered 6 years of my life to protect you, you know? So trying to explain to people how it's different but the same as Section 8 was like the biggest challenge for me.
Thank you, Yvonne, and thank you for your service. Other folks on the panel, if you can speak.
It was an honor.
Other folks on the panel who want to speak to this question, Mayor or Kim?
Just like there's no place to apply to because I don't have the income to pay the rent. So just finding a place to live. I mean, there's no apartments. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the exorbitant amount that, you know, apartment complexes are charging for their rent, and then they just up it every year. And, you know, I don't have the monthly income to pay for that. So it was really hard to find a place to even apply to.
Yeah, the supply is the big issue. Mayor?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback back off of that. Thank you, Kim. I think that one of the biggest challenges for me was not only finding the housing, because I'm a pretty good researcher, but it was also the application process was very, very difficult. Often tons of pages of materials, some of which you had things for, some of which you didn't, differing rules in every single place that you go. Nothing gets replicated. So in other words, if you apply to one place, you have to go to the next place and you have to do it all over again with about 20 pages of documentation. And then just getting to those places physically, mentally, and emotionally was very difficult. So I think that was the biggest challenge. And then I want to answer the previous question of how you keep going.
Yes.
Because there's a piece there that I really want to underline and emphasize, and that is the community of people that are housing insecure. Some of the most creative, amazing people that I have ever met in my entire life. I'm so grateful that I get to be a member of that community because they are so incredibly creative and supportive, and they will get in there with you and row with whatever they have. So I want to point that out as that is an absolutely profound resource.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Here's another question, and I'm going to ask you to put your policy hats on. Do you, thank you. Do you have any specific examples of policies or actions that you'd like to see the City of Cupertino implement that would affirmatively further fair housing? And I'll open it up to whoever wants to talk first.
Can I go first?
Please, Yavante.
Okay, because I don't know when I'm going to cut off. One thing I would like to see is application fees disappear. Especially if I'm willing and able to bring my own credit reports with me and give them to a potential landlord. They should, I mean, they're like charging $100 per adult for an application fee. And if you're in a bad situation financially, you know, coming up with that is almost impossible.
Thank you, Yavante. Other policy recommendations from the panel. Josh?
Honestly, I don't know what it is, but something's got to change about the waiting process. Because when you're on a wait list, that's the definition, waiting. Like, you don't know how long it's going to be. I wish there was a way to at least try to speed it up. Because I know for my situation, the only reason why it got sped up because my roommate actually worked in the city of Cupertino, but I didn't. So I don't know, something along those lines has to change, in my opinion. Not just because you work in the city, you should have like a higher priority. It should be priorities like just anybody, you know, just try to speed it up. I mean, something like that. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Mayor?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to say, I'm sorry, Kim, do you want to go?
I'll go after you. Go ahead.
Okay. So, well done. I would say centralization is kind of my key thing that I'd like to see us doing a much better job of centralizing the listings. Speaking to the fact that there's no visibility to wait lists and things like that there's different rules in each place. Let's go ahead and provide some transparency. Let's get in there and actually provide information in a central spot for people to gather so that what resources we do have, we actually can distribute rather than making it a hunt and pick kind of situation that really increases stress for people.
Awesome. Thanks, Mayor. How about you, Kim?
Yeah, I'm going to say a couple things, and if you've already mentioned them, then just let me know and I'll, move on. But, I did a little bit of, did a little quick search on the internet, to get ready for this panel, and I found that there are only 3 affordable apartment apartment complexes in Cupertino, so that made 127 units. There's 9 BMR apartment complexes in Cupertino, that's 190 units. That's next to nothing, right? And then I hear about, okay, they're going to build a luxury hotel where the Goodyear tire is and where Marina Plaza is. They're putting in fair market condos for sale there or something like that with just a couple of affordable housing units. And I really think that, the policy should be stop all this fair market stuff, stop building a luxury hotel. We need to put in something with extremely low-income housing, affordable housing. You guys need us in this community to work these lower wage jobs. And we need housing for us. So let's make an effort and change the policy to put in the supply that we need. When you're building these things and you're just like, okay, we'll put in 2 affordable units. Well, that's not enough. And I've also heard that, if developers wants to it all to be fair market, they just have to pay a low, fee of amount of money, and then they don't have to put in any affordable unit. So the policy needs to change to make sure that these extremely low income units get built.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kim. I literally could spend quite a long time talking to the 4 of you and learning from the 4 of you. Unfortunately, this is only an hour-and-a-half program. Now, I know a lot of you online and in person asked questions that were not answered. They will be answered. We'll send out an email with the questions and the full poll data after tonight's program. So rest assured, we will get to all of your questions, even if we can't get to them right now during the program. So we're going to conclude with one final question I'm going to ask each of our 4 panelists, and that is, what is one thing you would like all attendees to take away from tonight's panel? And Yavante, why don't we start with you?
Um, I would like everybody to get involved in a positive way. You know, be advocates for people who don't have, I don't know, maybe the courage to be advocates for themselves. Um, because a lot of times you hear people, the loudest when they're complaining, but it would be really nice to hear people really be loud when they're speaking up for like the homeless and the potential, people who are at risk for being homeless. So yeah, get involved.
I love that message, Avante. Thank you. Kim, how about you?
I kind of already talked about this just a minute ago, but I also think that what he just said is really important. Like if on Nextdoor, support people instead of just like saying, oh, go someplace, these people need to go someplace else. I just want to say people may not realize that if you want a store to have someone working the register and stocking the shelves, if you want someone to take your order, wash your table, wash your dishes at a restaurant, if you want someone to teach and take care of your children like I do, right, then you need people like me. And we deserve to live in the communities that we work in. We deserve to be able to live in the places we grow up in. I mean, this is my home. I lived here for over 50 years. Why should I have to leave my home because it's too expensive to live in now? That's just not right.
Thank you so much, Kim. How about you, Josh?
Yeah, I think Yavante made some great points earlier. But I think for me, it's just like, we're all human. Just because we're in different income brackets doesn't make us any less of a human being compared to everybody else. We may not have the same income as you, but we all have aspirations and hopes, to get to where we need to be in life. And, it's just like a level of respect. We all want the same level of respect as everybody else. So I'll just leave it at that.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh.
Exactly.
And Mare.
I think that what we're doing right now, I want us to do more of this. I want us to be able to actually have the conversations so that you can speak with people who have differences from you, so that you can start to understand that maybe the differences aren't exactly what you thought that they were, and also that we can be interconnected. I just want to emphasize communities that are integrated, that are that first picture on that scene. I can't remember what we were saying, the diversity image at the very top. They're really amazingly fun, creative, and full of life. Yes, they have problems, but so do the communities that are isolated. So we need to be able to be interconnected here, and this is a beautiful way to get started. So come on, let's keep going.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So there you have it. Get involved. Raise your voice in support of folks who are housing insecure. We're all human, and have more conversations. Those are some of the takeaways, just a very small kernel of takeaway from our amazing panel. If we can do virtual rounds of applause, or feel free to in-person round of applause as well. We can hear that too. Hopefully you all hear the love. There's lots of love in the room. Thank you all for making the time to be here with us tonight. And with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Kristen from EMC Planning.
Yeah, I just want to give all of you a chance, to reflect on a couple of the questions that you're going to go back to your breakout room. I'll read them. What impact did hearing from the panelists have on your thoughts around housing, the housing element, and representation? And what barriers and unmet needs did you hear from the panelists? Did you notice how you feel? What was new or moving to you? That's what you'll be sharing in your breakout rooms. But just take a couple of breaths before you go there so that you can share that, your thoughts and that. Back to you.
So those questions are in the chat for those of you online who are moving into rooms. For us here, you're going to move back to your tables. We'll have about 18 minutes, table 1, table 2. And if you weren't on a table, you can now move to table 3, which is down here in the corner. During the last 5 minutes of your breakout session, we have a survey for you to fill out online or in person. Please, we very much need your feedback. So please take a minute to fill out that survey. Your moderators will tell you when to go ahead and give that a start. With that, we will send you back to your breakout rooms, and we'll see you at about 8:02. See you then. Okay, we're going to pick up again, folks, and conclude this evening's program. I do hear the folks in the room having really interesting conversations, so I'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. Folks in the room, if you didn't have a chance to fill out the polls, please pick up a poll before you leave tonight. They'll be at the front desk where you checked in. We also want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to fill out the survey we sent you. If you didn't finish the survey in person or online now, that's fine. But please take a moment to fill it out and submit it maybe just after this meeting before you forget about it. We know what happens after we leave things. They just end up as an open tab on our browser, and then we're not sure what that tab was for. So please go ahead. We'll be sending out some links in the chat as we finish up tonight. For folks who are in the room, we'll be providing QR codes for you to see those links as well, so you have all the same information. I want to again thank all the folks who participated in tonight's program. Our hosts here at the City of Cupertino, Luke Connolly, thank you so much. Our partners at EMC Planning, Andy and Lee, thank you all so much. Our team at West Valley Community Services, led by Kylie, our public policy coordinator, who's here in the room. And I also want to thank again our incredible panel. Thank you for being here tonight. I want to thank the more than 50 people who showed up online to be with us and the 20 or so who are here in person. We are going to end with a couple of poll questions. Before I do that, I do want to talk to the slide you see in front of you. And our speakers mentioned this tonight as well. We're doing this because it's so important for you to be involved in this conversation as stakeholders in the City of Cupertino. So please raise your voice, engage in the conversation around the housing element, around affirmatively furthering fair housing. But how do you do that? Well, there's a link to visit online on the City of Cupertino's Housing Element site. You can sign up for the Housing Element newsletter. You can complete the Cupertino Housing Simulator, and there's planning commission and city council meetings to attend as well. Talk to your friends and neighbors. Share your thoughts, your questions, your ideas, anything that came up for you in your group or in the conversation this evening. Now we're going to end with a couple of poll questions. So if we can launch our first poll question. On a scale from 1 to 10, how strong of a sense do you think you have of people's experience related to housing now at the end of the program? Again, for folks in the room, you can fill that in person. You're getting it now from Kylie. But go ahead, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1, very little, 10, the most. How strong of a sense do you think you have now of other people's experience related to housing? That's our first closing question. And why don't we share those results? Because I know we're running a little bit long. And I would say, while not seeing the starting question, seeing that there are a number of people who marked 7, 8, 9, and 10, which is more than 50% of our attendees, we have definitely moved that bar northward, which is awesome. Our second question is, how much do you know now about affirmatively furthering fair housing? And it's the same question. I'm hoping no one marks I've never heard of it, because you all have heard of it now. I've never heard of it, very little, some, a lot. I'm an expert. Maybe more of you are experts now. Go ahead and fill out that question. And why don't we share those results? I think that's a quick one. Yes, some or a lot, which is great. There's a little trickster in here. I've never heard of it. Funny. It's good to keep your sense of humor. And our last question is, what is one thing you're going to do now to get involved with the Cupertino housing element? And this is an important question because studies show that if you pick something specific and concrete, you are more likely to do it. So what are some of those things, or one of those things, or all of those things that you're going to do to get involved with the housing element? And as an added bonus, I would say, once you commit to that thing, tell a friend, tell a family member, because not only is writing it down, committing to it verbally, but telling someone makes it even more likely that you're going to do it. Let's see those results. So we have 27% say they're going to attend a planning commission or city council meeting. 13% are going to visit the Housing Element website. 27% are going to attend a Housing Element community meeting. 13% are going to speak with at least 3 friends or neighbors about the Housing Element. And 20% are overachievers, are going to do all of the above. Last call, please do make sure that you fill out those surveys here, either here in the room or online, and the poll questions. You will get an email following up to tonight with answers to your additional questions we didn't cover, and some additional information about getting involved. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to Kylie Clark at kyliec@wvcommunityservices.org, and she will point you in the direction of the person who can answer your question. And you'll receive that email tomorrow or Wednesday for those of you still online. I want to thank you all again. You all have so many competing interests and demands and responsibilities. That you joined us tonight means that this is important to you and you care. I encourage you to get involved, raise your voice, participate in the conversation, and we look forward to having you join us for more of this work around the housing element in the city of Cupertino. Thank you so much, and good night.